a great presentation with a real earwormy title. After I say it, try not to sing a song in your head, but we have a presentation by Sama Al-Sharif, Sharon Ince, Lisa DeLuca, and Chelsea H. Barrett, and all from Seton Hall University. And they have a presentation, Data Consultations, This is How We Do It.
Thank you so much. And good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to our talk today. So though there were 4 names on the abstract, myself, I'm going to be the primary talker, I guess you can say presenter. And my name is Chelsea Barrett. And then Lisa DeLuca is also on the call. So she can correspond via chat, and she'll probably correspond via the Q&A if there are any questions. So this is Data Consultations. This is how we do it. And the reason we named it that, it's not because of the song, though it was a cute play on words, but also because we want to have this be very interactive, see what you all are doing in conjunction with what we're doing, just to get feedback and have a conversation, because you'll see when I go into the overview how we started and where we're at now. And some people may be further along, some people may not have started this process. So just having the conversation about workflow. So our research data services team started in 2019 with 2 people, Sharon Ince and Lisa DeLuca, who, like I said, is on the call. And they pretty much saw a need to have centralized data support on campus. And some of the wonderful talks from this morning kind of alluded to that fact, that there needs to be help. Some people in undergraduate and even graduate courses need that extra assistance to combat data ethics issues and to just kind of understand how to properly find, visualize, manage, and analyze their data. So Sharon and Lisa took the opportunity to create a research data management plan, create the infrastructure, and thus data services was born at Seton Hall. So then in 2020, myself and our data specialist, Sama Al-Sharif, were added to the team. So we are a team of 4 people. And I want you to keep that in mind, because that's kind of why we are doing this talk here. So Seton Hall is in New Jersey, South Orange specifically. We are a mid-sized private institution, and we are a Research 2 institution. So we have a lot of original research taking place, and a lot of the faculty, students, staff are working with data. So our undergraduate enrollment is about 5,900 students. And this semester in particular, we had a large influx of students. So we've had more requests and more consultations than we had, last year this time. So a lot of this conversation has been taking place. How do we do and handle our data consultations as we continue to grow as an institution and as we continue to grow as a service? We have 90 plus majors and programs, and a lot of these programs are newer and they are adding in data components. So then it becomes, okay, how do we also support those classes? And I know a lot of people have probably had these conversations, and depending on what infrastructure you have, you may have different issues or solutions than we do. So if you, throughout this talk, have any recommendations, please put them in the chat or the Q&A, because we would love to just kind of have that dialogue. So where do we start in particular? Well, we start with our process. So like I said, we started in 2019 with 2 people, moving on to 4 people as of 2021. And we do also hire a research assistant if we have funds, like internal grants and, external funding from other institutions or wherever we get our funding. So we try to promote and market, and we talk to faculty. We try to ingratiate ourselves in certain committees that would promote data services, because, to get it off the ground is probably the hardest thing, making sure that people know, hey, you didn't have this before, but you have this now. So we promote that way. We promote with the Provost newsletter. We have a website, which I'll show in a little bit. So in promoting what we have, then it becomes, okay, now we're getting people coming in, we're getting classes, workshop requests. How do we manage our external expectations? And myself and my 3 other colleagues, we all have differing job titles, we weren't hired as data librarians. We were hired as business librarians and digital services librarians, social sciences librarians. And I know a lot of other institutions probably have that same issue where you have your primary obligations that you were hired to do, but then it becomes, okay, I'm doing this service as well, and I want to make sure that I'm providing that service. So how do we manage those expectations? And in doing that, we try to manage workload, see who's teaching more classes in their liaison areas. And we make sure that if someone is taking on about, 40 consultations and maybe someone else is taking on 25, we do a lot of cross training in our department as well, making sure that if one person, doesn't know data visualization, we have workshops, we have, little mini consultations within the team to make sure that we are all at least on a foundational level to support our students, which helps, especially if you have only 4 people. You have to make sure that you have those expectations in mind when you are doing scheduling and staffing. So all of us have a different specialization. So visualization, GIS, quantitative and qualitative, and we do separate our consultations in that way. And I'll show you on the form how we kind of delineate that. And something really cool that we do, and I don't know if a lot of other institutions do this, is we assign software licenses from our team. So on the one hand, we've worked with IT and we've gotten a university-wide STATA license, which wasn't there before. And now a lot of departments, classes are using STATA licenses. So that's really great. But then in doing our promotion and marketing and speaking to faculty and students, we actually learned that some people are buying their own licenses. Some people are working with different softwares and they don't realize that other departments may be using it as well. So it's about, how do we make it so that it's affordable, accessible to everyone? So we've taken on the assignment, the responsibility of housing certain software licenses to things like ArcGIS and Atlas TI, which are gaining so much popularity. And it's just great to have that power to assign the licenses ourselves. So that's the crux of our foundation on how we start this process. So once people know what we do, they know what we have, how do they book a consultation? So we have our own website that we've created via LibGuides on SpringShare. I know a lot of libraries and institutions do use SpringShare for LibGuides, which is really, it's a great resource. I love it. Very easy to use. So we house our appointment form, we house our supported software, we house our blog updates as well on this page. And we put our data services classes here as well. So people can come here, look at the classes that we're offering via request, via, just in general, because we do offer things like Stata, Power BI courses so that students can learn. And we have other resources here as well. So our website is pretty much shared throughout the campus. We're very proactive in keeping it up to date. And, we've seen a lot of things this morning that we might, have conversations about to integrate into our own data services processes. So this is our appointment form here. And we use LibWizard software, which is also via SpringShare. So this is something you can add on if you're interested. And it's such a great resource because it collects data for analysis on the back end. So if you're like us, where you have to report what you've done throughout the year and make a case for what you're doing so that you can get funding and that you can, maybe get a space and build your team, it's really helpful to have that analysis aspect where you can take that data, put it in Excel or whatever analyzing software you use, and then create your own findings. So it's a very easy tool to use as well. So what we do is we ask for their names, of course. We ask for their email, and we do specify it needs to be a SHU.edu student or faculty member, only because we want to make sure that we are focusing on our community first. Depending on if we grow our team and if we get more resources, then we may have special services. Maybe, I don't know. We have to, I don't know what other institutions are doing in that realm, but we do specify it has to be a SHU email. We do specify what is your department of study and subject area so we can see what the commonalities are in certain areas. For number 5, it's really important that we ask for a brief description of their project because it gives us the time to say, okay, what are you looking at? How can we help you? How can we prep? And maybe it requires a cross appointment where you have your data analysis person and your data visualization person. So we combine that as well. We ask for the course name if they're able to give it to us. And for number 6 and number 7 in particular, these are very important in how we assign these things, because if we know that the person is working with data or managing data and they're doing qualitative data, then we know, okay, maybe the software, thank you. We know the software that they might want to use, or we know who would be best suited to help them. And then we can also group consultations if we see the need to do so. And we ask them what software they use, and we give them the opportunity to recommend software to us as well. And we ask them to give us 3 days and times that will help us to prioritize our expectations. And this is another topic that we're looking into on how people at Seton Hall are storing their files. That's probably going to be another talk for another time. But every question in our form is very intentional. And then we ask them for 3 days to prepare. So this is just a snippet of some of the software that we do offer. We have a whole list, and we do provide instructions on how to get to that, whether it's via a license or via free software online that we recommend. So in terms of booking, I'll just go through this really quickly. We do book differently. If we have a workshop that we're doing, we use LibCal, which is also on SpringShare, and that allows us to put it in our calendar, but on the front end, students can register. We get the registration, we can send them confirmations, we can send them reminders, emails, whatever we need to for the consultation, which is really helpful. But for consultation specifically, we use LibWizard so that we can generate different data, and you get data from both. It's just that LibCal generates it in a different way. You can actually export from LibWizard in an easier way for us. We ask for 3 days notice, and we give them the option now after COVID regulations have eased up a little bit. We give them the option to do in-person or virtual via Teams. And that's been really helpful for students and faculty as well. We've had student and faculty requests, and they're treated the same, but also treated a little differently in terms of the level that they are reaching. And in the future, we do want to target staff outreach and see if we can, look at what they're doing and help them in their process. So these are some of the visuals that we put in for our annual report. And these are things that we got from LibWizard. So based on what we put in that form. So we were able to get requests by department for Atlas TI, and that gave us the prompting to be able to request funding and see what we can do further. We have by affiliation, who are we serving the most? And we're serving graduate students the most, which is really great because we have a really big push to help graduate students on our campus. And what type of help they need. And that really helps us to prioritize as well. And that's really important because we're 4 people right now, mainly. So we want to make sure that we know what we're doing and what we're working with. So moving forward, we want to talk about how to optimize this process. And that's where we kind of want to hear from anyone in the audience if they have any process that they do, or if they have any questions for us and maybe see something we don't. We want to talk about using different software, for instance. So we subscribe to Qualtrics, our university subscribes, and they have the capacity to assign based on the answers that are put in. So if someone were to say qualitative, we can program it to send it to the qualitative person, or just come up with a different process. There's also something called Asana, which is really great as well for assigning tasks. So we're looking into that. We want to make sure that we manage the overall workload between liaison areas and data services. Like I said, we all have differing jobs that we do. And Lisa, myself, Sharon, and Seema, we are so busy in our area specifically.
1 minute.
Thank you. So we want to make sure that we handle that as well. Try to get more members on the team, maybe a coordinator of events, which would be really helpful. Continue our outreach to the institution and continue to do assessment on a semester basis so that we can optimize this process even further. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions after the session, you can contact us at data.services@shu.edu. Thank you so much and willing to take questions.
Great.
Chelsea, I don't see any questions yet, but there's definitely some conversation about balancing your original duties with new data responsibilities.
Yes, that's probably one of our biggest challenges right now, especially this semester. So I alluded to this in the beginning that we had a large influx of students this semester. And because a lot of, like in my department, for instance, in business, they have introduced a data component into almost their entire curriculum. So that increased what we're doing. I have a lot of consultations where people are asking for data. How do I find data? How do I analyze the data? How do I visualize the data? And where we had our expectations set for the spring, where we said, okay, we'll have this amount and we can manage it. Now we have even more. So then it becomes, okay, this isn't really my primary job, but I still am dedicated and devoted. And we as librarians, we're always devoted in so many different areas. It becomes this issue of, okay, where do I devote my time and how do I maintain my sanity? So that's definitely something we have to talk about. And we all, well, I can't say we all, I don't want to speak for everyone, but funds aren't always there to hire more people and to provide for this type of infrastructure. So that's something that we're constantly looking at and talking about.
Great.
We
Michelle.
do have a couple.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, we have a couple of questions in the Q&A. I'm sorry, Lisa, if you wanted to expand on that.
No, I just saw Michelle's comment about a book chapter offering advice for libraries. Because you can't do it all is basically what she's saying, right? You have to pick and choose and maybe drop some other services.
Right.
And Michelle, if you want to put in a link to that chapter,
Absolutely.
that would be great.
And would you like me to read the questions from the Q&A, or do you want to
No,
read
that
them?
would be great. Go ahead.
Okay, so we have one from Monica. How would you describe your relationship with your Office of Technology in terms of negotiating overlapping responsibilities?
Ooh. I can speak on that, Lisa, if you want to add, that's fine. I've only been here a year. Lisa's been here longer than I have. And what I will say is that working with the IT department, we also have a kind of TLTC, it's like technology learning and teaching. So we have a pretty good relationship with them in terms of saying, okay, we have this need, can you help us? I think with this data conversation, and Lisa can correct me if I'm wrong, we actually asked for less and we got more. So they're willing to listen. I know that sometimes it kind of seems like we're infringing and we don't want to do that, but we have these conversations and we try to collaborate as much as possible. Lisa, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would just add that, you know, some might say it has been combative in the past, but they're just looking at things from a different perspective. So if you do take the time, explain what we're doing, explain we're getting all these requests for, you know, quantitative research, they've definitely been willing to help us find solutions.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a couple more questions. We might not be able to get to all of these, but we have one. Since you have other duties, how did you develop the skills needed to meet these data needs? And they say, I'm particularly interested in software training.
So I actually had experience when I went to when I did my master's in library science. Well, they call it a Master of Information at Rutgers. They give you the opportunity to take data classes. So I learned foundational things there. But one great thing about Seton Hall is they subscribe to LinkedIn Learning. So they count it as continuing education, and you can go in and learn these freely. We send our students that as well. But it is hard to learn that. It takes a lot of time, I will say. So if you can devote the time, sure. If you can't, there are some great YouTube videos. But ultimately it is time consuming, I will say, especially with your other liaison areas and keeping up with being a librarian, which people think is easy. It's not that easy. It's this past year, my first year of being a librarian, I learned that it's not easy, but it's rewarding. So Lisa, if you want to add anything.
I think that was perfect.
Okay.
All right, and we might be able to squeeze in one quick question if you have a quick answer. But with regard to the consultation request form, do you think anyone gets deterred by having to fill out a lot of questions?
I don't think so, because I think they need the data support more than they have issue with filling it out. I think because there's a need, they're willing to do more. So we haven't had that issue, thank goodness. But that's a good point. We might think about consolidating questions, or using Qualtrics, like I said, might actually limit some of the questions. So.
And I'll just say we have to move on to our next presentation, but there was one final question. Maybe we can post that in the chat, or you, Chelsea or Lisa, you could follow up. But what would you recommend is the first steps for the first and only data service librarian at an academic institution?
Oh, wow. I can probably put that in the chat.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. All right. And we'll do our process of switching over to our next presentation. All right. And so for our next presentation, second presentation of this session, we have another cleverly named presentation. So we have Claire Payne and Jessica Coos from Stony Brook University with their presentation, "The University Does Revolve Around Us, the Library as a Central Hub for Research Data Management Services." All right, and I'll pass it off to you all.
Thank you so much. So hello, everyone, and welcome to our talk. As it was introduced, the university does revolve around us, the library as a central hub for RDM services. My name is Claire Payne, and I'm joined here by my colleague, Jessica Coos. And as the web services and data librarian and a health sciences librarian, respectively, we're two members of the data services team at Stony Brook University. And we're here to talk a little bit about how a group of librarians at Stony Brook has been able to creatively collaborate, even with pretty limited personnel resources, to position the library as a leader in the data services arena at our large R1 institution. And I actually think a lot of the things we're going to touch on flow very nicely from the conversations happening with that last talk. So hopefully that's helpful for folks. So a little bit of background on Stony Brook. As I mentioned, we're a public R1 research university located on Long Island, New York, and we're a part of the 60 campus State University of New York system. We have a FTE of approximately 25,000 students, depending on the semester, and are a pretty heavily STEM-oriented institution. So we support lots of natural, basic health sciences researchers, folks in that area. And Stony Brook consists not only of the main campus, but also we call it East Campus, our health sciences campus, and campuses in Southampton, Manhattan, and South Korea. And the university as a unit also includes a pretty sizable medical system, including the University Hospital and the Long Island State Veterans Home. And almost all of these campuses and units interact with research data in some way, but we want to highlight the units here that are the parts of the university really most relevant to data management practices and policies. Our Division of Information Technology, which we call DO-IT, on all of our campuses, the medical system, in the Office of the Vice President for Research, or OVPR, all do pretty significant work to support the university's research activities and researchers. So in order for the libraries, for us to play a meaningful role in research support, we have to work pretty closely with these stakeholders on both specific projects and just to keep ourselves apprised of research data related activities across these units. And while we've always had these relationships to some degree, it's really in the last few years that key personnel have connected directly from all these areas in an effort to make the university's research data services more robust and centralized overall. And that work really began with a task force in 2018-2019 that was brought together with representatives from campus IT, Stony Brook Medicine, the research office, and the library, including Jessica, but before my time at Stony Brook. And these task force conveners, which were the heads basically of most of those units, were especially interested in how Stony Brook could support increased funder mandates for data transparency, which I'm sure many of us are familiar with. And the group at the end of their initial kind of working time produced a white paper with specific hardware, software, and procedural recommendations designed to bring the campus resources really up to these standards. And while progress on some of the hardware and software recommendations stalled because of key leadership changes and, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic, task force members regrouped in 2020 to tackle one of the most pressing issues identified by the group, which was the need for an information resource for PIs, students, physicians, and all other affiliates. There were these extant data resources at Stony Brook, everything from research computing support to library training to repositories, but there was no central information hub to connect researchers to the resources, which meant that they were often unaware of the supports available, which was making processes needlessly difficult and needlessly confusing for faculty and staff in the offices and units that support research even. And of course, as librarians, we saw a need for an information hub as an opportunity. But before we get into that opportunity, I do want to take a step back and situate the Stony Brook libraries in this data work. As many of you know, librarians can have a role in all stages of the data lifecycle, skills across the range listed here, workshops and training, providing expertise in information organization and retrieval, all of that good stuff. But the challenge for us at our libraries is that we don't have a full-time data librarian or specialist to do any or all of this work. It's in my title, but it's a pretty small portion of my responsibilities. And definitely none of us think of ourselves as data experts, right? So that's why we've had to build the systems for doing any of this work cooperatively. In practice, this means that Jessica and I take the lead on data management work at the libraries, with me kind of on our main campus, and Jessica on health sciences topics, which is certainly more her area of expertise than mine. And then others here, we like to give folks credit, so they have critical roles. Mona guides the broader scholarly communications environment at Stony Brook and coordinates all our repository activities. The folks on the bottom row, Clara, Laurel, and Kate, are all either on our data management working group or provide instruction, or both. And then all of this is really supported by our interim dean, who's also pictured here. So you can see it's a big team of folks working on this. It's all very collaborative. And our goal is to provide useful services within the constraints of time and money, which we're all familiar with. So what that looks like for us, what we're able to do, we offer workshops on data management, including sessions specifically for graduate students, that we do get a lot of faculty and staff as well who are interested in this background. We provide an institutional repository that has functionality, if not perfect functionality, for collecting research data, and our faculty have used it for major projects in linguistics, geology, and more. Because there's so many of us that do this work, we can filter or triage data questions in a little bit of a less systematic way than our last presenters, but we're able to get it done to the most, but we send things to the most expert librarian to help with things like DMP planning, finding data, and more. And then, of course, as information people, we were excited to take on this creation and maintenance of a research data guide as the central campus hub, which Jessica is going to talk you through more specifically.
Great, thank you, Claire. So this brings us back to the need for that one-stop resource that Claire was discussing. And this is really a great fit for the library to create this guide and host it as well for the entire university. So Claire and I developed this research guide with input from the group of stakeholders that we had mentioned previously in the presentation. And so the emphasis on this guide is strongly on curating Stony Brook University specific resources. Outside of this guide, there's no other place within the Stony Brook University website that researchers can access everything all in one spot. So basically before this guide, they would just have to try to dig through different departmental websites, or maybe they could get lucky with a Google search and find what they needed. So in this first section of the guide, each page provides resources specific to a particular aspect of the data lifecycle. So it's kind of our version of an FAQ section. The Support at Stony Brook tab, as I mentioned, is the most important section of this guide. So it connects the researchers at Stony Brook directly to the data-related resources they need at the university. So the resources are organized by each relevant unit on campus, and the links associated with these units are found within each tab. The University Libraries tab links, of course, to the main library website and our events page as well, because we have various data management workshops. The Office of the Vice President for Research tab links to information about research compliance, the IRB, human subject research, and also other areas that that department's responsible for. The Division of Information Technology tab just links directly to the main IT website, where people can find different resources about software and different types of data management tools as well. Stony Brook Medicine Research links to facilities and services specific to Stony Brook Medicine. And then under the other helpful resources section, we have links to the Research Foundation for the State University of New York, the Division of Laboratory Animal Research, and others. So this page provides an overview of basic data management skills. So we kept this section very brief because there's so many other wonderful resources available. And believe it or not, there's actually a lot of discussion about which figure to use for the data lifecycle. So who knew that could be controversial, but that took some discussion, and this is eventually the image that we all agreed on. So under software and technology, we have different subheadings based on the resource type. So we broke everything down into different categories. We have planning, as many other universities do. We have a DMP tool. The computational or data storage tab provides links to tools provided by Stony Brook and also open source tools. So links, there's a link to Box, a link to Google Docs, and others. The electronic data capture tab contains links to Qualtrics and REDCap, which are supported by the university. Reference management contains links to EndNote and Zotero. And then the other category contains links to the library's Center for Digital Humanities, which offers various tools to researchers. And also OpenRefine, which is a data cleaning tool that's freely available.
5 minutes.
Thank you. So there's a lot of wonderful tutorials available online. So we linked to them here rather than recreating the wheel and making our own, which is something we might consider in the future. But since Stony Brook, as I mentioned earlier, provides access to REDCap, we broke out those tutorials from that resource specifically here, so they'd be easy to find for people that want to learn more about that resource. So as Claire mentioned, the librarians at our institution, we work on a liaison model at Stony Brook. So data management services are just a small aspect of our responsibilities. So the librarians are always looking to develop their skills in data management. So we thought it would be helpful to just create a section specifically for our librarians if they're interested in learning more about different aspects of data management. So where do we go now? So we're currently working with the task force on identifying a new data repository. We have an institutional repository that's currently powered by bpress. However, it can't handle large data sets or protected health information. So we need another option. And we're currently considering Figshare among several others. All the librarians involved in data management continue to work on continuing education, as I mentioned, and we also attend data conferences as often as possible, such as this one. We're also looking into hosting a group data training in the library and having a trainer come to us, which I think would be really good for engagement. And we're also constantly developing new workshops. We've started including data sets in our collection development practices. And we're also working on enhancing our ability to support additional data management tools, such as Tableau, hopefully in the future. And based on some of the talks I've seen in this conference, I'm also coming up with some other ideas for us to work towards. But as Chelsea had mentioned in her talk, it's very difficult to find the time amongst our other responsibilities. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening to our presentation, and we'll take any questions.
Awesome, thank you all. So we have about, we have 5 minutes perfectly for Q&A. So feel free to pop any questions you might have into chat. Or excuse me, into the Q&A or chat.
The Q&A or the chat was going very active with discussion about being the first data librarian, which I'm very interested in as the first title person with that in their title, not the first person working on it at my institution.
Oh, and I'll put a link to that guide in the chat if anyone wants to take a look.
I know while in the throes of hosting, one thing I did notice is yes, the data lifecycle is controversial. So I'm not surprised that you had to had arguments over which one to use.
Yeah, that was a hot topic.
It was, yeah. It was, I think what was the most funny was it was like the one hot topic. Everything else, everyone was very agreeable about. You know.
Right. I like what Ellie
And
said.
Jessica just, I was going to say, Jessica just shared the link to that guide in the chat.
Yes.
Okay, we did just have a question come in through the Q&A. I don't know, can you all see it?
Yes, someone says, are you data librarians or do you have other areas? You all seem to be so organized. Thank you. We absolutely have other areas. So my title is web services and data librarian, but I would say the bulk of my responsibilities are in the web services area. And I also am the liaison to the art department. So it's sort of a bunch of different hats. And then Jessica is a health sciences librarian supporting the School of Medicine. Is that, I've said that now and I'm questioning myself.
No, I'm the liaison to the School of Medicine. I'm also the liaison to our program in public health. So that keeps me pretty busy. And basically, I just developed an interest in data management. So I decided to pursue it. And I thought it was really important for Stony Brook to be, to have representation of those services in the library. So I thought it would be an important thing to start. And luckily Claire came along and now we're in it together.
Kevin asks, how did you get buy-in for who would be point on the guide for each topic? I can take a stab at this, and then Jessica, if you want to add on. I think the first thing was that there were like a bunch of different resources people had produced. You know, our folks in medicine had kind of visualized something that they would like this to look like, and they'd shared that with us. You know, it was like a Word document with a ton of links in it. And then we had other documents from our research office. So I think more than taking point, Jessica and I basically took point on actually putting it all together. There were some suggestions, of course, but mostly it was collating all those existing resources. And then Jessica and I sort of divided up when we were like, okay, we don't actually know what this is or what this policy is, reaching out to the people who did have those answers so that we could provide them. And there are, I think, of course, some things that are still, you know, we have contact information for people because it's really hard just to distill, such as our like data ownership policies for the State University of New York, which are not straightforward at all. And you can't really just tell people what to do about that. So, you know, that's what librarians are good at, right? Bringing expertise together and making it digestible. Would you add anything to that, Jessica?
No, I think you did a good job of covering it. And now the challenge is going to be keeping everything updated. And now, of course, departments are going to change their websites and change their links. So that's going to be a challenge.
Yes, that was the challenge with our old research. We had a data research guide that hadn't been updated in a while, and everything was broken.
So we
Just
got,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Claire. I was gonna say, we have one last question if we can get it in really quickly in the chat or in the Q&A.
Jessica, I think
Okay.
you probably know more than I do about how we developed our relationship with the research office.
Yes. So basically, a small group of us had met about data management within the library, and also we had forged a relationship with a researcher who was involved with the IT department. And so then he reached out to the chief information officer at the time, who put together this task force. So it was the chief information officer that reached out to our VP of research and had him involved in the project. And also we connected with another person from IT, and also the Dean of Libraries joined the task force. So it was really the CIO who reached out. I don't know if we would have had as much luck if us as librarians had approached the research office, but also, you know, it can help to reach out to maybe the person that's responsible within the office for handling grants and helping people with their grant applications, because that was another person that we created a relationship with within the Department of Research. So that might be helpful as well if you can't get to a top person.
All right, well, thanks, y'all. So we'll go ahead and switch over to our next presenters.
Thank you.
All right, so for our final talk of this session, we have Brianne Dosh and Monica Ely from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And the title of their presentation is, "What does the reference interview accomplish, and how does that translate to data? A model for the data interview in libraries." All right, I'll let you all take it away.
All right, thank you. We did not get the memo about having a catchy title in this session, so I hope that you can forgive us. So my name is Brianne Dosh. I'm co-presenting with Monica Ely. We are both from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. I'm the social sciences data librarian. I have a liaison area in psychology, but I work also just across the social sciences with secondary data set discovery. Monica, I titled her data science librarian because she's one of our data librarians that kind of does everything. She is our liaison to our national lab in the area and our joint institutes, and she just does a lot with data. So I've titled her our data science librarian. And the impetus for us wanting to talk about the data interview model is kind of combining our efforts in our data services team in streamlining how to properly triage and help people that come to us with information needs around data. So right now in the research, this is based on an article from 2019 about where research data services is in libraries. And it kind of divided the different types of services into, sometimes it's a consultation, more performative, like consulting on a data management team or finding aids, LibGuides. And then on the other hand is the technical side, right, of helping them with code or software and the technical part of data services. And this is great and helpful, but one of the things that we found challenging when we've been thinking of our approach to tackling the information and data needs is it just talks about the librarians and their roles when we really are part of an ecosystem of services and resources throughout the university. And this is kind of an example of the research life cycle, which also is controversial, like the data life cycle, because it can look different to every researcher and department and what their priorities are. And so we found in the literature when it comes to the data interviews that, okay, they tell us, here's these list of skills that you have. This is what librarians do. And this is the life cycle that it should fit into. And a lot of times we're like, well, this is great. This is overreaching. But when I run into a problem and I didn't triage a data question correctly and we end up down the wrong rabbit hole, we didn't find kind of the models out there for data interviews as helpful as we were hoping. And to kind of talk about where we are with an ecosystem, we've figured out, especially at our university, the different people that we interact with a lot is our Office of Information Technology, who are the keepers of the software and the trainings a lot of times, our fellow librarians who refer people to us, who know what questions to ask and when to send them to the data services team. And then we're also partners with the researchers and the faculty and the students and the skills that they have and the research ideas that they have. And to tie that all together, we also really rely on our licensing agreements with vendors and publishers. Sometimes I feel as though vendors and publishers can be our partners, but there have been times in recent past that I have felt frustrated that we are stuck in the 1950s sometimes with how we expect our researchers to do their research with our licensing and text mining agreements. So that was my little nudge at them, that I feel like our ecosystem really relies on our agreements with them rather with them. And so kind of based on this, we're going to talk about how we started to pick apart how we would want to approach a model for a data interview that could be more specific. And so I'm going to turn it over to Monica right now.
Thank you, Brian. So as my colleague introduced the idea, we are really coming at this from a perspective of, okay, there's literature out there that says, this is what data librarians should do. These are the services libraries should offer. But as my colleague suggested, there's really a problem with thinking about librarians or any individual in isolation as opposed to part of an ecosystem. And a big part of that ecosystem is the researcher themselves. We need to include them in this transactional process. So the framework that we are building for approaching the data reference interview, and when you think about that life cycle, I would point out how at the beginning it grouped the concept of searching for data with the parts where you're searching for literature, and that's an important part. Many researchers, anecdotally based on our experience, have not yet realized that they need to approach the data aspects, the data planning, in the earlier parts of their project planning than they already do. Many times what happens is they get to us, they've got a plan, and the plan is not feasible for various reasons, and we have to kind of start over again. So one of the main objectives with the data reference interview is to not only figure out what are the resources that are needed, but also to manage expectations. So these are some of the questions we feel will contribute to a successful data reference interview. And to have a successful data reference interview, we draw on the basic skills, the reference interview skills that we all learned, on day one of library school, which is focusing on the information need, not so much verbatim what the patron tells us they think they need. So you have an information need. Let's think about what kind of data we can transform into information to address that information need. Let's start from the beginning and not make assumptions. And then from there, we ask ourselves, where are the data sources that we can use to get that data to address that information need? And a lot of times people will come, by the time they get to us, they might already have an idea. They think, I need Newsbank, I need this data set, I need to go here. And it's good to kind of look at all the sources that are available kind of with a fresh start, as opposed to just jumping down the first rabbit hole our patron has found to send us on. And then once we've identified
the data that meets the information need. We've recognized all of the different places we can go to acquire that data. That's when we think about how can we get that data. And this is an important, it's deceptively simple question, but this is where we start to address those problems that were alluded to by my colleague earlier. Are the licensing agreements feasible? Do we even have access to this data through our text and data mining agreements? It's so quite often, and it's disappointing that we find ourselves in situations where, yes, I have to tell my patron, yes, we technically have access to it, but we cannot support access at the scale of the methods that you are trying to employ here. We don't have that. We can't facilitate that scope based on our licensing agreements. If it's a restricted use data set, there may be social processes that we have to go through in order to negotiate access to that data. We might have to sign a data use agreement. There might be costs. And I'm going to go back to the other one, Brianne. We'll switch in 1 minute. And once we address those things, then we start thinking about what tests and methods need to be applied to the data. And the reason I include this as part of the data reference interview question is because a lot of the times we're finding people are very excited about the text and data mining, the big data types of research methodologies and how to employ those, but they don't necessarily understand them very well. They don't necessarily understand what types of questions you can answer with a big data, with a machine learning approach, as opposed to a more qualitative approach. And gauging that skill level and familiarity ends up being an important part of the reference interview, because it also tells us what types of resources we may need to guide them towards. Or we might find out that they're biting off more than they realize, and they don't really want to go down that path. The project timeline is another important question to inquire about in the data reference interview, because again, what we're finding over and over and over again is that dissertation committees will sign off on projects. People will make commitments on projects for data that they don't actually know whether or not they have access to. So asking that question right from the beginning lets us figure out how to manage expectations. Even if the news is bad, we can give them the bad news from the get-go, and then come up with another solution. So, okay, let's move on to talking about some of the different types of problems that we can encounter in the data reference interview. So what Brianne and I felt like we need a better framework. We need a more applicable, framework for grouping the types of and dealing with the types of problems that we can encounter in the data reference interview. When I'm talking about problems, I'm talking about the things that can go wrong that stop people from getting to the information they need. We're going with two major categories of issues. One is the technical complexities that get in the way of people successfully getting the data they need. These talk about basic technical skills, the hard skills that can be the problem. We're talking about machine readable formats. Do you need to know how to access data through APIs? Extra large file sizes? Are there for metadata standards? Anything that deals with, computational hardware, software types of skills and tools and those obstacles. And the important thing is we need to suss out the researcher's capability. And, this is what I'm talking about. The reference interview is a dynamic. It involves not just the librarian skills, but what is the researcher's skill? Because the librarian is not going to do this work for you, right? And then moving on, we also have social problems. We have social complexities. These are all the human, the man-made constructs that get in the way of successfully doing the research. These can be examples such as cost. They can be licensing agreements that are not conducive to text and data mining, restricted use data sets that have to be negotiated. We have to go through extra steps. And moving forward, if we use these two types of obstacles, these two types of complexities to assess and evaluate each problem that comes our way in the data reference interview, we can kind of think about it as a spectrum. Something can be very socially complex. It can be something where there's a lot of costs involved, or there's a lot of social negotiation. There are use agreements that have to be signed and negotiated, but still be very low in technical complexity. So for example, if somebody's just giving you a link to an FTP file and you can download it and it's in a nice spreadsheet, that's low technical complexity. If you have to learn how to use Python or another language to access the data through an API and it's in a machine readable format, that would be high technical complexity. So even if it's free and you don't have to negotiate something, it could be, that's low social complexity, but high technical complexity. So this just gives us a framework to start to evaluate and think about the challenges that stand between the researcher and successfully access and using the data.
And I'm just going to give you an examples of things that we've run into that we were hoping this model that we're building could help people get to the point of giving, there's a barrier, what the solution would be, and the skills. Unformatted data needs to be manipulated into a network graph. There's software involved. And so the skills a lot of times would interact with our Office of Information Technology, but would also rely on the researcher developing those skills. Sometimes it is something like a restricted use data request, right? That needs the knowledge of data use agreements, the IRB applications, and also having the credentials, right? And being able to ask the questions at the beginning where we know these barriers from the very first moment that the student or the researcher talks to us. This is an example of a mix of technical and social barriers. Where we had someone who needed to mine data from a proprietary database. They needed to know Python, and we needed to negotiate that ability in licensing. And so kind of our approach that we're hoping that this model does in dealing with technical complexities is to help people evaluate and communicate about the technical obstacles from the beginning, which involves educating the researchers about what's feasible, and the data doesn't just exist, and no, your librarian won't write your Python code. And after the education point, to be able to help them to reassess and to be knowledgeable enough in the technical and social levels of complexities to be able to help them establish a new plan. Similarly with social complexities that lie a lot with librarians and their knowledge, is making sure we are negotiating those better licensing agreements with our vendors that allow our researchers to ask for the moon and ask the questions that they want, and also having the budget and the training to have librarians be prepared to have these conversations and be a part of the development of tackling these social complexities.
1 minute.
Thank you. Our next steps are to take what we're talking about and to map the data skills that are listed in the research and map them to technical and social barriers. And lastly, and then we'll want to be able to have these general questions that can be used to measure the scope and the depth of data needs to identify the social and technical barriers that can be used by other librarians so that people can be helped from the beginning and manage their expectations and make it to filling their information need, rather than when they do come to us after they found their data or they've written their dissertation proposal and they think the data will just be available, that we're able to meet them at the beginning and also be able to share with other data librarians these more concrete approaches to getting down to the information need and its scope and its scale. And with that, what questions do you guys have?
So I'll just point out we had one question in the Q&A, which was, is the data reference and read done prior to consultations, if you have any, and incorporated into a form? And I would say just like a regular, and I've typed some notes here, just like a regular reference interview that is done at the beginning of the consultation process. We want to ask those questions and knock them out right away, because we found it's integral to avoiding going down rabbit holes and for the purpose of managing expectations so that people know what's realistically available to them and can use their time wisely, which ends up being extremely important, especially in cases of like graduate students who are working on a timeline. They've only got so much funding, and they need to graduate. You know, they can't waste months of their time going down the wrong path.
A question that we just got in the Q&A is, are there any patterns or differences you've noticed depending on whether you're doing a data interview with a graduate student or a faculty researcher? And in my experience, the universal question to this is yes and no. A lot of times I deal with graduate students whose faculty advisor may not have given them enough information or training, and then they come to us wanting the moon or not knowing how to ask their faculty advisor for help, especially when it comes to a dissertation proposal that involves a lot of data or hand coding or other things. But it tends to be, depending on the level of research and level of technical complexity, a lot of times I run into, similarly with graduate students and faculty, being surprised about what is already out there cooked and ready for them to use data-wise, or they'll be shocked that there's an IRB process for something on a sensitive topic, or that, no, we have to mine the data and format it in order for you to be able to analyze it. So really that data literacy part of them knowing what is actually out there, I find kind of universal across faculty and graduate students. Monica, do you have anything to add?
I would just add that I think we see the most challenge in areas of interdisciplinarity. So where we're seeing the data science techniques and the computational methodologies branch out from those traditional hard engineering domains into other areas like the digital humanities. We have people in the business departments and just all other departments who are seeing the value of these tools and ready to explore and learn with them, but don't necessarily have the experience with it. And so a lot of times we do end up seeing dissertation committees with faculty who are super excited about, yes, let's, I want to see what you can do and see how you use this new computational methodology in our domain, but they themselves lack the experience to recognize the limitations of it. So that ends up being an exciting but real challenge for us when they get to our part.